really finesse out this new streaming software, but I'm into it. So I think we're good. I'm pretty sure. Okay. Let's see. All right. Cool, cool, cool. So, welcome, guys. Welcome. Thank you so much, as always, for being here with us. We're live on just a bunch of platforms, actually. I think we're on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, though I think primarily, as always, it's about YouTube is where the audience is for sure. Anyway, you guys know we are here doing some live breakdowns of the situation in Ukraine. Yeah, and always here to answer any questions you guys may have. But of course, before we kick too hard into it, right, we're going to give everybody a chance to kind of join in here. Yeah. And I'm going to pull up the news, of course. Yeah, we've got a lot to cover, certainly. There's always the post-Prigozhin Wagner question, the potential breakthrough in and around Robotyne. Going to talk about my big announcement. We got all of it. So I see people are kind of filtering in, dropping in, saying hi from all different locations, right? Afghanistan, Denmark, the UK, Papua New Guinea. I think some people are just making these up. But you never know. You have a big military audience, you have a big overseas audience, you know? Military's, there's people stationed everywhere. Right? Sweden, Brazil. And as always, you guys know, if you want to jump to the top of ensure you get your question answered, yeah, you can always drop a super chat like Lynx just did. Yeah, Lynx asking, remember when we talked about doing more of a pinpoint attack on Ukraine's part? Now they are, and it's working. No one's talking about that. I think it's been pretty talked about that Ukraine for a long time has been doing a steady campaign of interdictions. Some of them have been newsworthy events for sure, hits on the Kursk Bridge, but there's a lot that have been just unexceptional, just blips on a map, especially when you talk about hitting. It seems like Ukraine likes to hit maybe big central targets, again, like the Kursk Bridge, and then sort of work its way inward, pressuring Russian logistics. So, again, it's not going to make the news every time they launch a HIMARS strike at a munitions depot, but that deals damage in just the same way. We saw their raid on Crimea, where they supposedly took out some air defenses. Again, when we take a look at the map, I mean, we'll see there's a bunch of these just notes about all sorts of different bridges and military deployment areas where we're seeing targets where Ukraine has been striking at munitions points. All right, so slowly people are filtering in. If you guys weren't here for the previous video, I did make a pretty big announcement, something I've been working on for a long time. But yeah, I'm going to talk about that real quick. Oh, Kyle Franston, is there a chance of non-Ukrainian pilots manning F-16 similar to Flying Tigers in World War II? I think that is really, really unlikely because it's been so keeping your citizens out of this conflict has been so something that every supporting nation has been really careful to do, right? The danger of escalation is considerable. I think if you told me that Ukraine would have less than 10 retired pilots from these other countries go over and fly F-16s for them, it wouldn't shock me, but the numbers would be very low. And frankly, I think even Ukraine, if they had a fully trained F-16 pilot, I don't think they would have them flying sorties. I think they would actually have them train the trainers, right? So they would sit there, they would be taking Ukrainian pilots and doing some more training in-house, right? So that some pilots would be learning overseas in places like the UK and Denmark, or US and Denmark, and then some pilots would actually be learning in Ukraine under these like foreign volunteer instructors. That I think is a much more likely outcome, but I've heard rumors that some pilots actually sign on that they cannot share technical data or flight data or like specific mission stuff about what they do with foreign governments. Ohms, thank you for the 5. Okay, let's talk a little bit real quick. I'm just going to pull up the old control map. Looks like there was a fairly recent update, so we'll take a look there. All right, so looking at the control map, Geraldine Thomason, thank you for the 4. They reportedly updated the situation near Robotyne. Let's see what the biggest changes are. This is actually pretty considerable. As you can see, this is the 24th. Then we have the 25th, Russian forces withdrawing a little bit. And then the 26th, you have a pretty substantial push by Ukrainian troops, kind of exactly where we thought they might be. Again, if they're trying to roll back these Russian fortifications. Yeah, there we go. When we bring up the fortification map, you could see what we're talking about here. I think you're really seeing Ukraine try to break into this key area here, these 2 key trench fortifications. It's like you could see how extensive these fortifications and these trench works are. I think this is sort of like infecting the bloodstream, right? So if you wanted to get an infection or like let's say you wanted to inject a vaccine into the bloodstream, you gotta, once you hit the vein, you can flow through all this. And just like this, when you have these trenches, it's fairly easy to clear through these trenches, especially if you're assaulting from a direction they're not prepared for. And that, I think, is what you're seeing Ukraine do. And the fact that there is these pretty substantial withdrawals by Russian forces and that Ukraine is so close, right? You could see they've even reportedly liberated, they're in some of these. I think it's a really bad sign for Russian troops. Okay, Dynamite, thank you for the 5. Ollie asking, any thoughts on starting a Discord to help grow the channel? Oh, brother, we have a Discord, and we've had one for quite some time. Let me see if I can throw this in the chat. So, yeah, the Discord is a really popular. We have, I think almost 3,000 people in it. It's gaming. It's there you go. There's the Discord link. But yeah, we have a gaming section. We have a military section. We've got a whole Ukraine conflict section. So definitely want to check that out if you can. And thanks again to Fitblum for the super chat. Yeah, be sure to hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, you should subscribe. When you guys hit the like button, it tells the YouTube algorithm that I'm doing. This is a good live stream. I'm delivering on what is promised. Okay, Mesty asks, do you feel Ukraine can still get their territory back even if other Western countries elect politicians who are more pro-Russian? Okay, so I think the short answer is yes. Aiding Ukraine is still pretty popular in most of these countries. It's tough to say, right? Because Ukraine has received a lot of aid, and in the grand scheme of things, there hasn't been a huge change in terms of their ability to liberate territory, right? Russian control has been within about 1% of where it's been for the last 6 months or so. That said, I think it is not impossible But I think it would be tougher. It would get a lot tougher. And yeah, I don't know if they were to lose, let's say, 20% of their typical aid. I think it would be really hard for them to maintain even this level of offensive action. I think you would see Ukraine focus on defensive efforts. Paul Berger, thank you for the 10. So looking again down here, I think it's really promising for Ukraine that there's been this move here, and I think they're really trying to get and break this first Russian line of defense, and get into these trench works and start to turn Russian forces. I think this could be, depending on how the exploitation looks, pretty disastrous for Russian troops. Because you can be pretty sure, right? The thing with these two lines of defense is that there's probably not a lot of mines between them. It's probably not mined anywhere near as extensively as it was along this front lines, simply because the Russian troops know they're going to have to counterattack, right, between these trenches. That's why they have that dual trench system. They get pushed out of one, they counterattack into the other. Martin Johnson, thank you for the 20. He says, he's asking if Russia were to engage in nuclear blackmail. Well, the answer is that the international community would punish Russia in a non-nuclear way with a very extreme way. For example, if they were to do that to Kiev, I suspect strongly, and the U.S. has communicated this, I think, using in ways Russia will probably understand, that every Russian soldier, every Russian military member outside of Russian sovereign territory would be killed. The U.S. would use the full weight of its military, of its arsenal, cruise missiles. Again, not because Ukraine is not under the U.S. nuclear umbrella, it would not be entitled. Like if Russia were to nuke Warsaw, a NATO member, then the U.S. has said we will respond with, it will trigger mutually assured destruction, right? Because that's how NATO works. Kiev does not have that level of protection, but the U.S. has said, like, we will stop at nothing. Every Russian brigade, every Russian surface ship, everything will be destroyed with conventional weapons. Everything within our power. And on top of severe sanctions, China doesn't want to see this level of escalation in the conflict. China already has sort of indicated in some ways that it feels bad, that it's bothered by Russian aggression and their some of their posturing in this. So I suspect that Russia would become a very, very isolated country. It would probably be plunged into like North Korea levels of poverty. Jordan asks, why did Prigozhin feel safe enough to hang around Moscow with his friends on a plane? We all saw his stupid wigs and disguises. Why so careless all of a sudden? I suspect that Prigozhin became so careless because he believed that the deal he made with Russia was in effect. I think that's the bottom line. I think his living, his survival was part of that deal. And Prigozhin, of all people, should have understood that the deal that he made, right, was not enforceable. He needed to maintain a certain level of power to mean that if you like, what he was banking on was the idea that if he were to be killed, Wagner Group would exact revenge. But he advertently or inadvertently realized Wagner had been sent to Africa. They were in Africa and in Belarus. A lot of them had been sent home. It wasn't clear who was paying them. And so I think he realized that Wagner was being cut out from under him. But I think he still believed that deal was in effect. Civil Defense, thank you for the 5. All right, taking a look at the combat map real quick. we could see in the last 24 hours or so, Russian forces still continuing to launch offensive efforts. Probably not the right call, but we saw this even during the Kharkiv offensive, where Russian forces would continue to like conduct offensive actions in places that were kind of head scratching, when it seemed like they would be better spent taking those troops and deploying them to shore up a defensive effort. But you can also see Russian forces really heavily using artillery in Zaporizhzhia to try to basically stop this Ukrainian breakthrough, to try to suppress reinforcements from coming in. I think that's what you're seeing here. I think you're seeing Russian troops, Russian artillery in its defensive role, covering a retreat, covering troops who are falling back and need to reposition. But you can see that the area that's listed as contested in this map, very, very aggressive. It's in Verbove. It's in Novo-Fedorivka. It shows all of Prokopivka as contested. So I think this is a sign that I wouldn't call it a breakthrough. I would call it a breakthrough if we see in the next 24 to 48 hours more movement into Russian trench fortifications. If those Russians can't stabilize their big lines of defense, then you may start to use the B word, breakthrough. Thank you, Asdrin Rahami. A cup of coffee on me. It's the afternoon here, so if I want to sleep tonight, I can't have coffee yet, but tomorrow morning, you bet I'm going to go get myself a fancy coffee. Thank you. So what I did want to talk about, speaking of caffeination, so I talked about this on the live stream. I think some of you guys, or not on the live stream, but on my daily update 2 days ago, yesterday, where I launched this, talked about something that I've been working on for almost a year now, and that is actually my own product. Basically, the story is this. When I was in Afghanistan, right, I needed a way to like stay focused, a way to get caffeinated and energized on these like super long combat patrols, because I would patrol for, we go on like a 8-hour, 10-hour, 12-hour patrol. I'd come back, I'd do all my reports, I'd do my post brief, and then I would go work out. All my soldiers did. And so the only thing we had to stay like caffeinated and energized were these cans of Rippets. If you're a veteran, you know what I'm talking about. These things were so gross, guys. They were loaded with sugar. They sucked. The bottom line is they sucked. They were super inconvenient. We'd have to like keep them in our pockets. It sucked. So I decided, right, that now that I could finally design and launch my own product, that I would solve this problem. So I worked with a manufacturer in Denver to create Strike Gum, right? This is a pre-workout gum. I've managed to work with them, and we got it so that you can get an entire scoop of pre-workout concentrated into one single piece of gum. And it is like a really tremendous like surge of energy. It's got as much caffeine as about a shot and a half of espresso. But here's the thing. The reason that first, 51% of the profits from this, I'm donating to Ukrainian charities that help civilians who've been displaced and injured in the war, because how can you not, right? And I've been talking about it for a long time. So if you're interested, right, you can go to strikegum.com to pick some up. And if you also want to help, especially if you're an internet savvy person, we have an affiliate program where if you sign up, right, you will get a special link, and you'll get a 10% cut of all the sales that people make through your link. We have a Discord just to help people. If you've always been interested in like doing the like affiliate marketing thing, we have a Discord with all the assets, with all this stuff in there, so that you can start making content, start, promoting the gum, and then you get paid a portion of the sales. Ukrainian charities get a big chunk of those sales, right? And of course, consumers get the something that's never existed before, which is an entire pre-workout in a single piece of gum. So again, if you're interested, check it out, strikegum.com. And you can go to the link was put right up there, or rewards affiliate program, and that'll take you to the affiliate program where you can sign up. Anyway, thanks to everybody that supported me. We're working on getting international shipping. Right now, we only ship to the U.S., but we're working on getting that fixed so that our European and Canadian audience members, there's a lot of you guys, can pick some up. So thanks again. Okay, we've got a bunch of super chats. Mesty asks, I don't think any country would go nuclear because of mutually assured destruction. Based on this, why is the West so scared of aggravating Russia? No fly zone, but here's jets, etc. So Russia still has some level of they can still escalate this conflict in a non-nuclear way. They do not yet have a general mobilization. They can start to conscript their entire military or their entire able-bodied men into this, and Russian ultranationalists are pushing very hard for this exact thing. So that would result in a big escalation, especially if it meant that a fully mobilized Russia would be in conflict with NATO forces. Even in a non-nuclear sense, it would still be costly to NATO, even though NATO would pretty clearly mop the floor with Russia. A mobilized Russia would still inflict considerable casualties. And as we're seeing in this conflict, even with the best NATO equipment, if not and a medium level of training, it's not decisive against this Russian military on the defensive. Jacob Randall asked, do you think cluster bombs are good at quickly demining the front lines? No, I don't. And the reason is because cluster bombs are good, but when they explode out in kind of a three-dimensional way. And so to clear, first off, you want to clear a linear path. It's inefficient to clear an entire field. And you're sending out shrapnel at a pretty high concentration. But remember, a mine is like a disc, right? Like a mine that's buried in the ground might not be any higher than this. So you may not destroy that mine. Actually, a good approximation for the size of an actual anti-personnel mine is actually the box of strike gum here. This is about right. But you can imagine that if you were this low to the ground, just a few inches tall, there's no guarantee that that shrapnel would hit. So it doesn't really do a lot of clearing of anything. Anon asked, do you think Ukraine would accept Wagner troops into their army? The Freedom of Russia Legion actually made an announcement asking disenfranchised Wagner troops to join them. And I think I think some will take them up on it. You saw a video, the Russian government actually paved over several Wagner graveyards, sort of erasing the memory that Wagner ever existed. And for a insular loyalist militia, that's a pretty big FU. Big enough to go over to your enemy's side? Maybe. David Molinaro says, Paul, Slavic words ending in an E have an sound. So Robotyne is pronounced Robtina. So Satova is pronounced Satova. Oh, okay. That's helpful. Thank you. All right. So taking a look at, of course, War Mapper. Let's see if there's anything good. Actually, no, War Mapper is he's on vacation. But let's just see. Let's just see what's on Twitter. I'm going to try to do this without getting demonetized. Let's see. All right, let's see if I can get away with this. Armed Forces Ukraine broke through was difficult. Oh, according to a statement they've said, an officer said, we have passed the main roads that were mined. We're reaching the boundaries where we can go forward. I am sure that we will go faster from here. Huh. Interesting. As discussed. It sounds like maybe they are past some of the deepest mining. You could see this meme here, which is actually pretty funny and also kind of illustrative of what I'm talking about. Exactly that you could break in and then, not unlike Pac-Man, you'll be able to sweep through these Russian trench lines. I don't think it will be this dramatic. I don't think the trench lines stretch all the way to Bakhmut, but I think you'll see some really potential effects if this is indeed. Jose Diaz says, God bless freedom lovers. To all the Russian bots, keep crying, sniffling copium. Glory to Ukraine. Okay. Nice. Um, okay. Again, here's the time lapse of the Robotyne offensive. Trying to get the significant gains in the last week. Oh, this is okay. Oh, interesting. Yeah. I mean, this is really an interest. I mean, this is not news to any of us, certainly. Let's see if we can find the latest. Sometimes the latest stuff has good things. Yeah. There's a lot of saltiness. Oh man, the level of saltiness on Twitter is pretty mad. Dunko, there's a map showing a 2 to 3 kilometer advance near Robotyne, and it corroborates what you just said. Yeah. Yeah. I think I'll be very curious to see what it says tomorrow. Right? There's some people here who are saying that, oh, everyone always says Robotyne. But here's the thing, guys. Robotyne has been it's been like every other village, right? It's been being taken slowly and then all at once. This is kind of how this momentum works. You know, this is how breakthroughs work, right? Sort of like a tug of war, right? You ever done a tug of war? You know that it's even until suddenly one side moves a little, and it moves a little more, and then they finally collapse and fall in on themselves. It's sort of like knocking someone over. It's hard to knock someone over whose feet are firmly planted on the ground, but if you can get them to be a little off center, the next shove knocks them over. So that's why I think that's sort of a good way to think of breaking an enemy force's lines. Again, this doesn't mean that it's a sure thing. I'm just telling you what I think the Ukrainian strategy is, and that if that is the strategy, then it appears to be working so far. But Russia has shown an ability to really dig in, really harden its defenses. It sounds like here's a commentator. Again, it's tough to verify any of this information. That the Russian reinforcements reserves in the south. It's safe to say that he was referring to the movement of units from the 76 Guards Air Assault Division from the northeast. So it sounds like they're starting to maybe reposition some Russian troops away from the northeast into to try to stabilize the situation in the south. Mesty asks, what are those weapons on my wall? Well, first off, these are wooden cutouts, and they are cutouts of the military police crossed pistols. I believe they have a specific name. They're Harper's Ferry. Let's see. Here we go. Here's the actual site on them. The Harper's Ferry pistols. They were part of the original. Harper's Ferry used to be an arms manufacturing plant in early America, originally model 1805 or 1808s. And they were issued to handguns issued to U.S. Army dragoons in the War of 1812. This was considered to be an early weapon of the military police corps, right? Who were known for sort of operating like behind the lines and hunting down both partisans, operating in the back fields, and of course for enforcing discipline among troops. So that symbol became the symbol of the military police corps of the U.S. Army. So I got that as a gift from my company when I left active duty. Right, there's an inscription on there, right, to Captain Lewandowski, and then an inside joke between me and my first sergeant. It actually says to the Shadow Commander, because to make a long story short, in Afghanistan, right, the Taliban would have shadow governors, and they would have shadow district leaders, like they had shadow judiciaries. The idea was that they had their own government structure in parallel, and it was referred to as shadow. And I had a pretty weak commander. And so in many cases, the sort of officer level leadership that the company needed often came from me. And so the joke among the senior NCOs was that I was the shadow commander, that if you wanted something to actually happen, if you wanted an officer to actually exert some influence and show a little spine, maybe push back on something stupid, you had to go to me, the shadow commander, who is the XO. It was also the company I deployed with to Afghanistan, and I tried to actually get the guide on from the deployment, but somebody else had scooped it on me. Okay. Looking at other stuff. Right. There's a lot of different updates about Robotyne. Someone, this is pretty funny. Someone points out Robotyne population 74, right? And let's be clear. None of these villages are in and of themselves tactically like game changing, right? This isn't like liberating a provincial capital or something. The appeal and the tactical advantage of these areas is that, as we see from this map, that this represents the hinge, so to speak, where the first line of Russian entrenched defenses are at their most vulnerable. Messi, thanks for explaining Shadow Commander. Yeah, that's, again, if you aren't an Afghan veteran, like, that's unique to the Afghan war, the Taliban shadow government concept. So again, I like kind of dated myself there. But yeah, you can see the significance of Robotyne is its proximity to this first Russian defensive line. Yeah, definitely seems to be a day with a lot of copium. Anyway, if you guys want, by the way, if you want to check out some of the combat videos, I do analysis of them. Some of the fighting in Robotyne, we've seen a lot of videos coming out of trench clearing and trench warfare. On Tuesday, we're going to actually be taking a look at that viral video of the Russian troops who, in a panic, charge into the wrong trench line, landing in the Ukrainian trenches. And if you want to check out those combat videos, I do the analysis on combatvetnews.com. The videos coming out of the front line are so intense that I cannot even show the thumbnails of the members-only content without getting demonetized. And YouTube certainly will demonetize me at the drop of a hat. But if you want to support what I do, you can always become a member at combatvetnews.com. Any one of these tiers gets you access to the members-only content. We drop 2 videos a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And it's all the latest combat videos, looking usually of the combat that happens that week. So again, be sure to check it out. And of course, thanks to every one of you guys, specialists, lieutenants, colonel tiers that support the channel. I really appreciate it. Yeah, and of course, you can always just hit that like button. Yeah, looking at the latest news coming out of Ukraine, right? And actually, we'll see if we can find the Institute for the Study of War, see if there's anything new there. But of course, if you guys have questions, definitely let me know. Okay, so it sounds like a lot of ISW is talking about Prigozhin's death. And let's talk a little bit about that, actually. So Prigozhin was killed a few days ago. And this is part of this is probably the culmination of a Russian effort to assert a tighter grip on the narrative around this sort of around the war, right? Igor Girkin is in jail, one of the ultra-nationalists who offered a different narrative than the Kremlin-approved one. Prigozhin Prigozhin and his second in command, who, in addition to commanding Wagner, also were notably willing to say some sometimes true things about the war in Ukraine, about the Russian military failures. And so I think this is the culmination of the Kremlin's desire to really like put an iron grip on any narrative that isn't Kremlin approved. Nioxy asks, what are the risks and benefits of Ukraine flying an F-16 at this stage of the offense? Well, it's sort of a moot point because they don't have pilots to fly the F-16s, and they don't have F-16s themselves. So if they had it, I have no doubt they would fly it. Well, I say that. If they had it, I think they would fly it if they were confident Russian air defenses were suppressed to a sufficient degree. That's what I'd say. They would have to solve the Russian air defense problem. Silverly Gas, how do you see this ending? I worry U.S. NATO will grow tired of it due to pressure from the public. I think that's possible. I think that if you asked me to place a bet right now, I think you would see it look a little bit like the 8 years between 2014 and 2022, where there was an area occupied by Russia, that the front lines were largely stable, that Ukraine would struggle to advance and Russia would struggle to advance, or sorry, Russian-backed separatists. I think that the likelihood of that, right, a lower intensity conflict that Ukraine ostensibly says, no, that this is our sovereign territory. Russia says, no, this is ours. And neither side really gives a lot away from their fundamental claims. Yeah, George says Wagner graves destroyed and Wagner talking about revenge. That is the big question kind of on everyone's mind, is can Wagner, without its core leadership like this, get organized enough to exact revenge? And is revenge even worth it? Obviously, if they do want to exact revenge on the Kremlin, they would have a powerful ally in the form of Ukraine. I have no doubt that the Freedom of Russia Legion would actually welcome Wagner troops who aren't war criminals back into the fold. I think you have some of these convicts that will try to come in, and then you have but that they would really want would be the professional Wagner soldiers. What's interesting, of course, is that Prigozhin seems to still be acknowledged as having made a great contribution to the Russian war effort. And officially, the plane crash is not linked to the Kremlin. Taduz Cantwell asks, was it the British who named the Afghans the shadow government? It sounds like how they name opposition governments in parliament. How do you think Ukraine will take back Tokhmak this year? I think there's a fair chance they'll take back Tokhmak this year. They've got 3 months left of the calendar year. So yeah, I think that is highly possible. If they fail to do that, then I think it's actually a pretty big problem for Ukraine and the counteroffensive. But yeah, what's also interesting, of course, Financial Times reporting on what it's describing as the bleak future of Wagner's operations in Africa. Right? It sounds like the GRU, the Russian intelligence, was trying to take control of Wagner's operations in Africa, which makes sense. It sounds like the Russian intelligence, the FSB, the GRU, that they've been involved heavily in Wagner's efforts for some time. And this would be, of course, in line with Russian goals to maintain Wagner and sort of the mythos and reputation of Wagner, but ensure that they are controlled more tightly by the Ministry of Defense. Right? Without Prigozhin's leadership, there's an argument that Wagner's operations in Africa may struggle, and it's unlikely the Russian military would be able to fully replicate Wagner's efforts in Africa under Prigozhin if the MOD did take over, probably because Prigozhin's personal brand was so strong that he was able to exact concessions and open doors in Africa. It also helps when you're a billionaire. being a billionaire is just more likely to get you friends and favors than being a mid-level Russian bureaucrat. That's just how a lot of the world works. Julie McFadden, thank you for the 10. I appreciate it. And thanks to Sarah, who says, MIA wing, no missile damage, attached wing does. Why? I think she's trying to say that there didn't look to be missile damage on the wing of the aircraft. But I would argue, again, you got to understand that air defenses and shooting down aircraft is not, it's not like the movies where it's just an aircraft and then it explodes, right? Air defense is still a messy operation. And there's no guarantee that a missile is going to explode right next to the aircraft. It just needs to go off close enough to destroy it, right? Which it did. And aircraft, right, need to have a level of integrity to fly. And it doesn't take much to diminish that integrity. Of course, if you guys have questions, feel free to super chat them out in the chat. Let's see if there is any other. Yeah, it's interesting. Here is a different analyst from Al Jazeera who's saying that Wagner actually, while Prigozhin is gone, Wagner may survive in Africa. Right? That his death may slow the Wagner machine. But apparently Wagner was in Mali. Oh my gosh. And apparently many clients in Africa rely on his unique services. Al Jazeera is also interesting simply because they are a legitimate news outlet that it has a different perspective than you often get from Western media. This seems a little more of an apologist for the Wagner Group, right? Describing it as patronage of his private military force has been on the rise as some African governments turn toward Russia as an alternative international partner in their fight against insecurity. Right? But he definitely was very popular in the Sahel. You can see Libya, Sudan, the car. And there were existing contracts. Russians probably honor these contracts. And it would be very, very curious. It's on one hand, Russia would definitely take any opportunity to make money instead of spending money on its military, which it has been. Right, the Malian coup described them as Russian instructors. Right, they're not sure if they need to thank Russian authorities or Prigozhin, but they really hope the assistance continues. Right, but I think for Russia, I think for Wagner itself, it needs the leadership. It needs the high-level protection that a state or an incredibly wealthy oligarch can provide. So while Wagner may persist, it's going to need another patron. And it seems like, in all likelihood, that patron is going to be the Russian state, which would, again, be more than happy to see a liability like Wagner Group sent to Africa where they can make the Russian government some money. Anyway, guys, what else do you guys have for me today? What other questions? You know, I am more than happy to answer them. Right, I wonder how many people are on Twitch. I'm trying to see how big the Twitch chat is. I mean, it looks like it's primarily YouTube at this point. But you know, if you're watching on Twitch, you know, let me know. Let me know. I'm here for you. Oh, eight people. Nice. That's a good amount. Mesty asked, do I think Africa as a whole will become more authoritarian or democratic due to Wagner Russian influence? I actually think that it's I think Africa may go more authoritarian, or if you prefer, authoritarians in Africa are going to be more open and reduce some of their the facsimile or the facade of being democratic. Um, I think I think that's just sort of a broad trend. I think a lot of these African countries are going to look towards countries like China, since China is investing a lot of money, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of assistance in various forms with various strings attached. And I think these countries oftentimes look at these nations. And again, here's the thing: if you're a fledgling democracy, the whole reason democracies work is because people get a say in their government, and then the collective decision making allows their lives to get better. If the lives stop getting better, then alternatives to the democratic system seem more appealing, especially if there's another country out there which has catapulted itself from abject poverty into extreme wealth through a non-democratic system, which is what China has done. Kyle Franderson, how can the technique of identifying mines by their heat signature be used to max benefit? Targeting Miclics, night clearing, or some other tactic? I think Miclics are still the best. I have heard there are some techniques where you can, on a hot day, mines will heat up and then they will cool more quickly than the surrounding ground, and that sometimes with the right thermal sight you can detect them. But my understanding is it's not reliable enough to really be consistent, be a consistent method of clearing mines, and that Miclics are just a better option. Guytech asks, could F-15s be an option for Ukraine as well, or are they too costly? My understanding is it would be too costly. F-16 parts haven't really been made in a long time. They're less available, whereas the F-16, every NATO partner has mechanics, they have a logistics train, they have all of this ability. Not every one of them, but many, many, many NATO partners have F-16s that they can use and aid in this effort, whereas the F-15 is just a more obscure, a lower production rate plane. There's just less flying, you know. Okay, did want to do one more quick shout out. I know some of you guys might be new or have recently joined, but real quick, I did recently launch my own product. I've been working with a manufacturer for about a year on this. The inspo was basically when I was in Afghanistan, I needed a way to stay like caffeinated, focused, and energized. And all we had were these Rippets. They were cans of energy drink. They were so gross. I would have to stuff them in my pockets. And so now, finally, I have developed a pre-workout gum called Strike Gum. It has 90 milligrams of caffeine. I've gotten an entire scoop of pre-workout into a single piece of gum, and it is, I think it tastes great. It's super energizing, and you can check it out at strikegum.com. And if you want to become an affiliate, we also have an affiliate program. So it's meant for people who, even if you haven't ever done like affiliate marketing before, we have a dedicated Discord. We have all the assets you need. And we have just a ton of assistance so that our affiliates can really spread the word on Strike Gum. You get 10% of every sale that comes through your links. And the most important and best part is that the affiliate, that 50 over 50% of the profits of Strike Gum are going to be donated to Ukrainian charities that aid displaced and injured civilians from the conflict. So if you're interested, right, go to strikegum.com and check it out. Okay, Dunkanu asks, do you think the documentation of war to the level it's being documented is a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a mixed bag. I agree that it is that there is that it has both good and bad elements. I think as a historian, as someone who values history, I think that is absolutely unprecedented to see not accounts of the war decades later, not statistics or questionable accounts or biased political reporting, but like real GoPro footage, hours and hours of it, of on the ground combat in the war, unprecedented. I think having all this drone footage and all this GoPro, it's not just good for the us as observers, but it's great because a it allows commanders to see things on the battlefield that you used to just hope that your scouts or your reconnaissance or your reports would accurately portray. And I could tell you, again, in Afghanistan, the ability of information to be degraded as it went up the chain of command was like wild. I would sometimes read reports and I would say, when did this happen in our AO? I've never seen something like this. And they'll say, Paul, this is your report just filtered from the company to the battalion to the brigade. And by the time it gets to the like command in Kabul, the division headquarters in Kabul, it's been turned into something preposterous, right? So I think those are good. I think it's bad because it can expose tactics. It can expose OSINT very quickly. And it's also, there's just a moral element, right? These are people's lives. It's not entertainment. It's not a joke. It's not a meme. It's human lives. And I don't even love sometimes the combat footage set to rah-rah music because I understand the Ukrainian troops that record it, right, use it to motivate their fellow soldiers. But to me as an analyst, again, I'm like, hey, there's lives on either side of this. And I can recognize that, like, I want Russia to lose the war and go home. But 19-year-old Russian kids, like they may not have much say in this matter. And I don't think whatever you think about Russia, I don't necessarily think they like deserve to be killed. I think it's unfortunate that they are killed in the war. Does that make sense? Like, I don't like seeing, teenage soldiers killed, even if I think that Russia should lose and go home and that it's necessary that happen. Sorry, this is a weird moral hair splitting. Braden Christensen asks, how far do you think Ukraine can push down during this offensive before winter hits and slows them down? Well, it's currently August, so they've got 6 months. I don't know. I'm as curious as you are. Either Russia's gonna break or it's not. So it'll be either a dramatic shift or it won't. I think that's what it'll come down to. James asks, why do you think Ukraine doesn't clean out Transnistria or build a force using only Soviet equipment to attack into Russia to circumvent defense lines and cut off communications? Because attacking Russian sovereign territory would politically empower Russia to engage in a general draft. Russia does not have its vulnerable supply lines, its vulnerable bases near enough to Ukraine that an attack from Ukrainian sovereign territory would achieve any of those effects. And they do. That's exactly what they did with the Freedom of Russia Legion, right? They also do it in part because the U.S. and their partners have said, do not go to war with Russian sovereign territory. Defend your territory because that is what we can sell to our public and politicians. Once we start encouraging them to invade Russia in any capacity, you don't become any morally better than Russia, other than the fact that Russia started it. But you also, it's harder to sell a two-way conflict like this to the public. Oh, Alexis says, oh, I missed your super chat higher. Okay, let's see. Oh man, it was way higher. Oh man, I can't even, I'm sorry. I can't even see it. That chat is gone. Will Russia ever change from its attitude to life? Mester asks. I think when Putin goes, I don't think Russians are like inherently bloodthirsty or cruel. I think they're just they're governed by Putin. I think that's what it comes down to. All right. Be sure again if you haven't hit the like button, it really helps me out. Uh, Arn Ice asks, I appreciate the CC on the YouTube vids. Also know some troopers on the front and the morale is thankfully high. I think we might be in a phase on the Robotyne where the IFVs like Bradley and Marauder, tanks and Spags and the Gephardt can really shine. I hope it sounds like that's correct. I mean, the mine, the problem with these mines, they really made these armored vehicles like they kept troops safe, which is good, but hitting a mine still is a vehicle kill. It still disables a vehicle. So the ability to clear unmined trench areas and use these armored personnel carriers, yeah. Again, if it wasn't for the extensive mining, I bet they could really do some work. I think you're probably right, Arn. All right. Any other questions? I know people are asking, have you thought about doing interviews with like Jake Bro, Vlad Vexler, and Arthur Ray? Yeah, I actually, yes, but I can't announce anything. That's what I'll say. Yeah, we are all going to be very intrigued to see just what happens with this Russian conflict. Can the Russian troops hold out? Guys, this is going to be a very, like, I think, telling week for Ukraine and the conflict. I think the question of Robotyne, what is going to happen? Will Russia be able to enter these trench lines and clear? Can they clear them? Right? Will Russia collapse, or will they be able to restabilize their defensive lines? These are like the big questions for sure. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have for you guys. Of course, a huge shout out to all the supporters on combatvetnews.com. I really appreciate you guys. I really couldn't do this without all you guys, especially our colonel tier members, especially our lieutenant tier members, but really all our members, all you guys are just, a huge, make a huge difference to me. You guys know I YouTube demonetizing me regularly. Patreon even booted me off. So I depend on you guys. And thanks to everybody that came over to the Strike Gum Discord, and everybody that's ordered Strike Gum already. Again, apologies to our Canadian and European fans. We are working with Shopify to try to get shipping to you guys. We just got to make sure that, we got to make sure that, like, we can figure out, make sure that we don't, like, not pay import taxes, right? I'm trying to keep this all above board. Mesty asks, when Putin is gone, will Russia be more extreme than him under a new leader? Man, I can't even speculate. Certainly, when they kicked out the Tsar, Russia did get more extreme. But you never know. Russia's tried everything but just opening itself fully to the West. So who knows? Oh, interesting. Sarah asks, Prigozhin's wife is the sole heir to Wagner, his money and properties. Is she active in operations? The odds that NATO had turned him. That is an interesting point. Now, Russia is only going to be taking your stuff. Russia will only let you inherit your stuff if you're not going to be a threat. So I think that there's a medium chance that Prigozhin just has his stuff seized by the Russian government for one reason or another with some pretext, that you won't see any of it. I think it's also possible that she inherits it, but just sort of understands that her life and well-being depends on her being quiet, not making drama, not causing issues for the Kremlin. So I think either one are actually pretty possible. Anyway, guys, that's all I had for you. Thank you, as always, every one of you guys for joining me. I appreciate you so much. And that's all I got. Cheers. And I will see you guys tomorrow for another daily update.